One moment, I was asleep in my husband's arms. The next, I was locked out of my own home in the freezing night, my entire life shattered by 3 mysterious words on his phone. The click of the deadbolt was the loudest sound I'd ever heard, louder than the frantic, desperate pounding of my own heart against my ribs. It was a final metallic snap that echoed in the dead quiet of our suburban street, a sound that sliced my life neatly in two, before and after. I stood on the cold, unforgiving concrete of our front porch, the icy teeth of the pavement biting into the bare soles of my feet. The November air, sharp and damp, wrapped around me like a shroud, raising goosebumps on skin that was covered by nothing more than a thin cotton camisole and matching sleep shorts. My underwear, basically. This was after. Just 30 minutes ago, I was in before. I was warm, safe, and curled up on our plush sofa, the one we'd spent 3 weekends searching for. My husband, Mark, was next to me, his arm draped over my shoulders. We were watching some mindless documentary about deep-sea creatures. The low hum of the narrator a soothing balm after a long week. I remember resting my head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, a sound that had been my lullaby for the past 7 years. I must have drifted off. I remember the gentle weight of him shifting as he carried me to bed, the soft kiss he placed on my forehead. It was so normal. It was our life, a good life, a life built on trust and late-night talks and shared dreams of a future filled with kids and a golden retriever. I woke up a little while later, thirsty. The glowing red numbers on our alarm clock read 2:17 a.m. My phone, which I always kept on my nightstand, was dead. I'd forgotten to plug it in. Annoyed, but not wanting to wake Mark by rummaging for my charger, I quietly reached for his phone on his side of the bed. It was a habit of ours. We had no secrets, no locked screens between us. I'd use his phone to check the weather, to order a pizza, to look up a dumb question that popped into my head in the middle of the night. It meant nothing. Tonight, I just wanted to see if I had any notifications, a silly, ingrained habit of the modern world. I picked up the phone, its familiar weight cool in my hand, his screen lit up with my touch, displaying his usual background, a picture of us on our honeymoon in Italy, smiling so wide our faces hurt. But over the picture was a notification. It wasn't a text, not an email. It was a calendar reminder. The alert was for tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp. The text of the reminder was only 3 words, 3 simple, nonsensical words. That's when I felt the bed shift violently. Before I could even process what I'd read, the phone was snatched from my hand with a speed that was terrifying. I looked up and saw Mark, but it wasn't my Mark. The man standing over me in the dim glow of the screen had the same face, the same sandy hair, the same blue eyes, but his eyes, usually so warm and full of laughter, were glacial. There was a surgical coldness in them I had never seen before, an absolute absence of any love, any recognition. A stranger was wearing my husband's face. "What are you doing?" He didn't shout. He whispered, and the venom in his whisper was 1,000 times more frightening than any yell. "Mark, my phone was dead. I was just looking at the time," I stammered, my heart starting to thud in my chest. "What's wrong?" "You don't touch my phone," he said, his voice dangerously low. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the phone screen, his thumb frantically swiping and tapping. "Honey, you're scaring me. I always use your phone. What is going on?" I sat up, reaching a hand out to touch his arm, to ground him, to bring my husband back. He flinched away as if I'd burned him. He finally lifted his eyes to mine, and what I saw there made the breath catch in my throat. It was pure, undiluted rage. "Get up," he ordered. "What?" "Get up!" He grabbed my arm, his grip like iron, and hauled me out of bed. The warmth and safety of our cocoon was gone, replaced by his chilling strength. He dragged me out of our bedroom, down the hall, my bare feet stumbling to keep up. I was confused, terrified, trying to ask what was happening, what I did, but my words were just choked sobs. He didn't say a word. He just pulled me to the front door, his face a mask of cold fury. He unlocked the deadbolt, wrenched the door open, and shoved me out into the freezing night. I stumbled, catching myself on the railing before I fell down the steps. I turned back, my mind a swirling vortex of disbelief and horror. "Mark, please, what is this? It's freezing. Let me in," I begged, my voice cracking. He just stood in the doorway, a dark silhouette against the warm light of our home. "You shouldn't have seen that," he said, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion. Then he closed the door, and I heard the click of the deadbolt, the click that ended everything. I stood there shivering, more from shock than from cold, replaying his words, replaying the moment I looked at his phone. I replayed the image of those 3 words in the calendar reminder. 3 words that made no sense, but had somehow been enough to shatter my entire world. The reminder, for 8 a.m. tomorrow, said, "Water the hydrangeas." We don't have any hydrangeas. We never have. For a few seconds, or maybe it was a full minute, I did nothing but stand there, a statue of disbelief carved from goosebumps and fear. The cold was a physical thing, a presence that was seeping into my bones, but my mind was stuck on a loop, playing those 3 words over and over. Water the hydrangeas. It was a code. It had to be. A simple, innocuous phrase that meant something else entirely. Something so important, so secret, that the mere possibility of me seeing it was enough to have me thrown out into the street like a piece of trash. My husband, the man who held my hand while I got stitches last year, the man who cried during the sad part of that animated movie, had looked at me with the eyes of a predator and cast me out without a second thought. The shock finally gave way to a desperate, primal need for survival. I banged on the door, my fists striking the solid wood until my knuckles were raw. Mark, let me in. Please, I'm sorry. Whatever it is, I'm sorry." The only reply was the silence of the sleeping neighborhood. Lights stayed off in the houses around us. No one was coming. My cries were being swallowed by the vast, indifferent darkness. I tried the windows, my fingers numb and clumsy as I pushed against the locked panes. Nothing. He had locked me out of our life as securely as he had locked the house. Tears were freezing on my cheeks. I had to think I couldn't die out here, my car. The keys were inside, on the hook by the door. Useless. But the garage... We had an external keypad. My mind raced, trying to retrieve the 4-digit code from the fog of panic. My birthday? No. Our anniversary? I fumbled my way around the side of the house, my bare feet screaming in protest as they met sharp gravel and damp leaves. I found the keypad, its small buttons barely visible. My fingers were stiff, but I punched in the numbers of our anniversary, 0712. A red light blinked. Wrong. A sob escaped my lips. Think. What other numbers mattered to us? The date we met? I tried it. 1023. The red light blinked again. Failure. I leaned my head against the cold garage door, defeated. Then a memory surfaced. A stupid joke from years ago. Mark had set the code to the year his favorite sports team had won the championship, a year he recited like a mantra, 1998. I didn't even know if he'd ever changed it. With my last ounce of hope, I shakily typed it in. There was a soft whir, a click, and the heavy door began to groan as it lifted. Relief, so potent it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. I ducked underneath and hit the button to close it again, plunging myself into the pitch-black, oil-scented sanctuary of our garage. It wasn't warm, but it was out of the wind. I stumbled around, my hands outstretched, until I found Mark's old gardening jacket hanging on a hook. It smelled of earth and gasoline, but it was the most beautiful thing I had ever felt. I wrapped it around my shivering body and collapsed onto an old lawn chair, my mind starting to clear as the adrenaline receded. What was I going to do? I couldn't call the police. My husband locked me out? They'd call it a domestic squabble. They might even make him let me in. But what would I be walking back into? I would be sleeping next to a man who was capable of this. No, I needed to understand. My eyes scanned the dimly lit garage, falling on the neat shelves where Mark kept his tools, his gardening supplies. And there, tucked behind a bag of potting soil, was a small metal box. It was a lockbox, one I'd never seen before. My heart started hammering again. This was it. This had to be connected. I frantically looked for something to pry it open with, settling on a large screwdriver. My hands shook, but I jammed the tip into the seam and twisted. With a screech of protesting metal, the lock popped. I lifted the lid. Inside, my breath caught. There was a stack of cash thousands of dollars in $100 bills, a burner phone, the cheap, untraceable kind, and a passport. I picked it up with trembling fingers. It was a U.S. passport, and the picture was of Mark, but the name was Robert Miller. Underneath it all was a thin manila folder. My hands felt disconnected from my body as I opened it. The first page was a dossier on a woman I'd never seen before, photos of her address, her daily routine, meticulously documented. It was terrifying. But it was the second dossier in the folder that made the world drop out from under me. It was a file on me. Every detail of my life, from my place of work to my mother's maiden name, was listed. And at the bottom of the final page, in Mark's neat, familiar handwriting, was a chilling note. It read, "Asset compromised. Hydrangea protocol initiated. Stage 1 complete." Stage 1 complete. The word swam before my eyes, cold and clinical, turning my 7-year marriage into a line item in some horrifying report. Asset compromised. Was that me? An asset? My entire life, our entire love story felt like a lie, a carefully constructed stage play where I was the only one who didn't know the script. The man I loved wasn't Mark, the kind-hearted architect who obsessed over vintage records. He was Robert Miller, a stranger who kept a burner phone, a fake identity, and a dossier on his own wife in a lockbox. The hydrangea protocol wasn't about flowers. It was an emergency plan, and stage 1 was getting rid of me. The cold in the garage was nothing compared to the ice flooding my veins. What was stage 2? My mind raced, connecting the dots with terrifying speed. The calendar reminder for 8 a.m. Water the hydrangeas. It was a message, an instruction. He wasn't telling himself to do something. He was telling someone else that something had been done, that the asset me was compromised and neutralized. My blood ran cold as I realized what that meant. Someone was coming. Someone was coming here to our house, expecting me to be gone, or worse. Panic was a physical thing, clawing at my throat, but the chilling note on my own file sharpened my fear into a razor-thin edge of focus. I couldn't stay here. I had to disappear. I grabbed the stack of cash and the burner phone from the box. I shoved the passport and the files into the deep pockets of the gardening jacket, which now felt like a suit of armor. I left the lockbox open and the screwdriver on the floor. Let him find it. Let him know that I knew. I slipped out the small side door of the garage, melting back into the shadows of the manicured lawns of our neighborhood. The world I had known just an hour ago was now a hostile landscape. Every rustle of leaves, every distant car engine, sounded like a threat. I ran, my bare feet numb to the cold pavement, not towards anywhere, but simply away. Away from the house that was never a home, away from the man who was never my husband. After several blocks, a lone taxi appeared like a mirage, its for-hire light a beacon in the oppressive dark. I flagged it down, the driver giving me a strange look as I climbed in, a woman in a man's dirty jacket and flimsy pajamas. "The bus station," I choked out, pushing a $100 bill into his hand, "and please just drive." At the station, I bought a one-way ticket to a city I'd only ever seen on a postcard, a place hundreds of miles away where no one knew my name. I used the burner phone to make one call. It wasn't to the police. What would I tell them? That my husband has a secret name and a note about watering non-existent flowers? They'd think I was crazy. Instead, I called the only number listed in the dossier on the other woman, a woman named Clara, a woman I now suspected was in the same danger I was. A recorded message answered, "You've reached a non-working number." A dead end. He had already cleaned up his tracks. As the bus rumbled through the pre-dawn gray, I looked at my reflection in the window. The woman staring back was a stranger, hollow-eyed, terrified but alive. I thought about the man I called Mark. Was he a spy? A criminal? I would never know. The life I had with him was a ghost, and I was now a ghost myself, running from a threat I couldn't even name. Months later, I was living in a small apartment in that faraway city, working a cash-in-hand job at a diner, always looking over my shoulder. I dyed my hair, changed my name, and learned to sleep with a chair wedged under the doorknob. One evening, scrolling through a national news site on a library computer, I saw it. A small article about a house fire in a quiet suburban town. My town. My house. The article said the fire was electrical, a tragic accident. The homeowner, an architect named Mark Peterson, was presumed dead, but they hadn't found a body. The fire had been too intense. I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold. He wasn't dead. I knew it in my bones. Robert Miller had burned Mark Peterson to the ground, erasing him as completely as he had tried to erase me. He had initiated his own stage 2. He was out there somewhere, with a new name, a new life, and probably a new asset. A cold knot of fear tightened in my stomach, but it was quickly followed by something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Resolve. He had thrown me out, expecting me to break, to freeze, to vanish. But he had underestimated me. He had taught me that the world was full of secrets and lies, and in doing so, he had inadvertently given me the skills to survive it. I closed the news article. He could burn his old life, but he couldn't burn my memory of the truth. I was no longer a compromised asset. I was a loose end, and I would spend the rest of my life making sure he always, always had to look over his shoulder, too.